what this webinar is about today is how technology can help you launch your clothing line, and how technology has changed over the years and is still changing in the apparel industry, and how finding a factory with the right technology will save you time and money. And then we're going to talk a lot about how 3D virtual prototyping is really changing the industry and how it will help with timelines, cost, marketing, and all that. Again, if you're a late joiner, feel free to just use the chat feature. If you're logging in through Facebook Live, I'm just doing that for the first time today, so I'm not exactly sure how to field those questions, so I apologize. Okay, so first of all, first thing to understand is what drives the costs in the US, making clothing in the USA versus overseas. If you buy clothing with a like made in, Bangladesh or Pakistan or China label versus if you buy clothing with the made in the US label, there is going to be a cost difference. And so the big question is why is that cost difference? And of course it's labor. Labor is the biggest reason why there's a cost difference. Overseas factories a lot of times can just pile on the labor and the price of the clothing does not change much. But domestically, here in the US and even in our factory, we have to get very creative using technology to help reduce labor so the price can be competitive. And so that's why it's really important for you to understand when you're starting out and you're looking for a factory, why you should be asking what technology they're using and what technology is available to them, because it's really going to affect your cost in the end, because the more technology they're using, the better your price will be and the more competitive it will be. Okay, so I'll go through a few things. So sketching, how sketching has changed. This is maybe obvious, maybe not. But in the past, everyone was doing hand sketches. There's still some companies and factories out there that primarily rely on hand sketching your garment. It's always good to have a sketch of the garment before it gets made. So that is our first step, which is we call design. If I would say it's kind of I won't say it's a red flag, but if things are being done by hand when you're working with somebody, maybe a little bit of a red flag just because of the labor that it's going to take. And then of course, they're going to pass that labor cost on to you. And then a lot of places, majority of places have moved to computer-aided design sketching, which is the picture on the right there. So as you can imagine, let's say this jacket on the right-hand side of the screen, if we want to make changes to it, we want to put on a new collar, we want to try different pockets, we want to do things like that. It's very easy on the computer. We can just delete the collar and use the computer technology to draw the new collar. If you're drawing by hand and you want to do a new collar, you have to draw the whole jacket over and then draw on the new collar. So you can imagine why that's really important to seek out, is the computer-aided sketching portion of it. Okay, so pattern making. Pattern making is if you're unfamiliar with it, it's when a pattern engineer makes the shapes of the fabric that get cut out that get sewn together to make your product. So you cannot have an apparel product without a pattern. It's virtually impossible. So on the right-hand side, again, there are still many, many people using this way of making patterns. I run into them at least once a month. I run into somebody who has a handmade pattern. It does not mean it's a bad pattern. It actually could be a very good pattern. It's just that the person who made the pattern is going to be taking longer than somebody who has pattern making software, and they're doing it digitally. So on the right hand side, you can see what it's cut out on kind of like it's a cardstock called oak tag. So that's the kind of old school way. Like I said, there's still quite a few people using that way, which makes sense if they're a small independent pattern maker. They might not be able to afford or want to invest in pattern making software because it isn't super cheap. But if you do find somebody who's using the computer aided pattern design, it can be done much quicker. I want to stress, you still need a very skilled, highly trained, very skilled pattern maker to make the pattern, even if you're using a computer. The computer software does not make the pattern for you. You still need a very skilled person like drawing the pattern on the computer. It's a lot quicker. If you make a mistake, you can just delete it. If you want to change something, you can just drag a line. Very different than having to draw it by hand. So here at Clothier Design Source, we do everything digitally. We do the sketching digitally, and we also do all the pattern making digital as well. Okay, so let's say somebody does come to me with a handmade pattern, not the end of the world. We can definitely work with it. So what happens is on the left side of the screen, we have what's called a digitizer, and we can take the pattern and we can scan it and get the shapes into the computer so we can work with it. Because we really don't work with anything in the hard copy way. I should also say another advantage of having a digital pattern is, imagine if it was just on that cardstock, you can lose that. It can get damaged by fire or water. It can just get ruined from the elements, or depends on how you're storing it. So it's a very precious piece of information for you. And once you make your apparel line, once you have your patterns, that is your shapes, that is your styles. And when we do it digitally, we're backing everything up offsite, and then you also can have a copy of it, and you can store that in multiple places digitally. So you're really protecting your asset more, I think, when you get it in digital form. Okay, another thing, so once a pattern is made, it has to be made in several sizes. So apparel generally is offered in many sizes, maybe extra small through extra large might be the most common. And so if you can imagine, you've got your cardboard, if you're hand making the pattern, or if you're getting it handmade, you've got that cardboard pattern. And then what happens is then they have to make every size by hand as well. And they use this device on the right-hand side, and I could only find a black and white picture of it. But again, people are still using it out there. And it's sort of, you make the different sizes of the pattern by tracing the original with this tool and creating, another piece of the oak tag in size medium, and then you trace it and make another piece in size large. And then on the right-hand side, grading gets exponentially faster. Again, I can't stress enough how you still need somebody understanding what they're doing, how to grade that pattern, how the body grows. For instance, if you think about somebody, how people change size or gain weight, like maybe if you're gaining some weight, your neck doesn't gain weight at the same rate that your waist gains weight, and your wrist doesn't gain weight at the same way that maybe your thigh gains weight. So it isn't just about making it a percentage bigger. You really need a skilled person changing that pattern for how people's body shapes change in different areas of the body. Okay, I see I've got a question here. Is making the hard copy pattern always the first step, or is it best practice to start with a digital pattern? I think it's best practice if you can start with a digital pattern. Again, it's not always possible, but if you can, then you're just kind of skipping over using that labor to draw it by hand. If you do start with a hard copy, that's okay. It can be digitized and put into a digital system. So hopefully I answered your question. I think it is best to start digital if you can, but it isn't the end of the world if you can't. Good question. Okay, so those are kind of the last three things: sketching, pattern making, and grading. Those are slowly changing in the industry. They're, I would say, maybe 70%. In the US, 70% of people are on board with getting that stuff digitized. Once you go overseas, I think there's still a lot being done by hand, much higher percentage. But again, in the US, what we're trying to do is be competitive by saving labor and using these tools. So again, ask the question, and if you want to learn more about us, you can contact us at info@clothierDesignSource.com. You can check out the Apparel Academy as well. And our factory here does use all of those digital tools. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into a more forward thinking. Not many factories are using this technology, but our factory is, so we're very excited about it. It's called 3D prototyping, and I would say a really small percentage of people are using this technology. These images on the top and bottom, and I'm going to show more as we go, are showing prototypes that we created on the computer before they actually existed in real life. And you're going to see more benefits of that as we go on here. So I'm going to show a video, and hopefully I can get the sound turned down. Hopefully you're not hearing the sound. So what's happening in this video on the screen right now, there's a pattern. That's the digital pattern I was talking about. And now we've made an avatar for a brand. This is a brand of cycling jerseys. And we are virtually sewing up the garment through the computer system. So we've put in the properties of the fabric. We've told the computer if the fabric is light, if it's stretchy, if it's drapey, if it's rigid, so we're really getting an accurate viewing right now of how that bike jersey is going to fit. We're also have the advantage of trying different prints, as you can see on the screen. Much easier and quicker to try out those different prints than if we were to send it to the printer, get it printed, buy the fabric, get it printed, put it on the garment, sew it up, show it to you, and then you go, oh shoot, I wish that print, the scale was smaller, or that color's a little off. The other advantage is right here you're seeing a tension map. Where it's red, it's tight. Where it's blue, it's loose. So if you can see back here on the bottom, it's a little blue around where there are back pockets in the jersey, and then it's red around the bottom of the jersey. So in this case, we're happy with that because we're saying where it's red, we want it tight around the bottom of the hip. Where it's blue, we like it loose because we want to be able to fit stuff in those back pockets. So we can at least get a rendering or a feeling of how that jersey is going to fit on that individual. So here we have another avatar. Again, the pattern has been created. We put in the properties of the fabric, and we're virtually sewing it up around the avatar so we can have a virtual fit session. there's lots of advantages to this. We can save time, lots and lots of time. We can save money. We can be playing around with colors and prints and all kinds of things without going to actual sampling. Again, the whole point is saving time and saving labor to try to make things more streamlined and to be able to make in the US. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. So the first step when we do a 3D prototype is we create custom avatars. So whatever brand you might be thinking about creating, whatever, let's say you've got a big and tall brand, or you have a maternity brand, or you have a women's workout line, or you have a triathlon line. All of those body types, are going to be different. So we can create custom avatars to fit your brand and make sure before we even pattern the product and start trying it on an avatar, we've got a good avatar that makes sense for your brand. And we can really help you determine what those body measurements should be, what kind of avatar it is, and how we're working with that. The next thing we do after we create the avatar is we help you source your fabric. So we've found fabric for you. We've given you lots of options up till this point. And we enter the properties of the fabric. So it's really important how a garment fits is how the fabric acts. So if it's a really stretchy fabric, if it's really lightweight, if it's really heavyweight, if it's really compressive, if it's really drapey. So we're putting in all those properties to make sure to make sure once we virtually sew it up, we're getting a true, accurate representation of how it's going to fit the body. And then we create the pattern, and this is just kind of a stop motion thing of how that looks. So we create the pattern, we put the pattern around the body, we tell the computer how we're going to sew it up, what seam matches to where. We're telling it what kind of seam we're using. Is it a stretchy seam? Is it a rigid seam? That kind of stuff. And then we virtually, start sewing that product together. And then again, we have that tension map. So once we're working with you, you don't have to, we're located in Minnesota. You do not have to be here. I would say around 80% of our clients are from elsewhere in the country and the world. So we can have that virtual fit session with you just over the computer. And we can answer a lot of questions like, do you like the sleeve length? Do you like where the neck is hitting? Do you like where the hem is hitting? Does it look too loose? Does it look too tight? And again, we can really guide you through that process, but we have this tension map. So like where it's red, again, it's tight. Where it's blue, it's loose, and where it's green, it's kind of in between. So we can get a lot of information from that. All right, so the other really exciting thing about 3D prototypes that I'm very excited about. So first advantage is you can fit it before it even exists. So we're saving a lot of time, material, and money just by doing that. Second advantage is we can create prototypes for you that you can start selling or gathering investments, maybe doing a Kickstarter, that kind of stuff before your product even is done being developed. So for instance, these bike jerseys on the right-hand side, you saw those in the video earlier. These are virtual prototypes. These are not photographs. And this customer was able to put them on his website and start selling them while we were finishing development, creating all the different sizes, going and actually getting it printed for real, sewing it up, finalizing which fabric we were going to use or which zippers, things like that. We were finishing up labels. So all that stuff takes time, but all the meanwhile, he's able to put these jerseys up on his website and start selling them and having a launch date and having pre-sales, which is the best business model ever because you got the money before you actually made the inventory. There's also something called Serve, which is on the right-hand side. There's only a shoe example on their website, but we can take those 3D prototypes that we've made, and then on your retail website, you can use Serve and take these 3D images, and then the client, when they're shopping on your website, can turn the jersey or turn the whatever apparel piece you have, turn it and look at it and kind of spin it. And it just makes the retail shopping experience a little cooler. All right, so that's it about 3D. I think one of the next things I'm going to talk about for technology is cutting. So you wouldn't really think about cutting being such a huge part of the process, but cutting out the patterns to manufacture the goods is a huge, huge part of the process. So here on the right-hand side, I'll play this video. So this is a representation of, I would say, how most factories are cutting nowadays. They take a fabric roll and they roll out the fabric like this, and what they're doing is they're stacking 50 layers, 100 layers of fabric. So you can see there's several layers of fabric being stacked there. And then what happens is they put the pattern on top, and then they cut out maybe a size small, and then all of a sudden they have 100 size smalls in that stack. So let's move the video a little further ahead. So how they're cutting out is with these saws. It's just called a saw, Apparel saw. They have a chainmail glove on, and they're using that saw, and they're following the lines of the pattern, which is the paper on top. So you can imagine they're cutting out a lot at one time because they have a stack of fabric underneath, but they're still doing it by hand, and the accuracy, not to mention how dangerous that is, and the accuracy and the time that it takes is longer than how we do it in our factory. So over here on the right-hand side, there's fabric in a stack, and we have a machine that vacuum compresses it down like this picture, and then we start cutting it out. So now you can see that gentleman on the left was cutting by hand with that saw, and now we're doing it with the computer operated cutting machine, and it's much accurate, it's much safer, and it's much quicker, and all of a sudden we get a stack of 100 smalls or whatever we cut out in a much, much, much quicker and safer manner. Okay, so now I've got a fun video to show you of where the future of sewing is going. So here is a robot. This is not commonplace. We do not have robots in we have, I would call our cutting machine a robot and things like that, but we do not have robots like this in our facility. This is the future of what's coming down the road. This is just a video I took at a trade show. And so it's not 100% feasible right now. I really don't know of anyone who's actually using sewing robots, but this is just what we're seeing in the future for technology of where it'll be going eventually. It is not fully developed to get there yet, but it's just kind of fun to share with you some things that I've learned out there. So feel free to ask any more questions, use the chat feature. There's a few ways we can help you. So if you're looking to start an apparel line, or if you already have and you're kind of getting stuck, get in touch with us. We do free 15-minute consultations with anyone. You can contact us, info@clothieredesignsource.com, which is on the bottom here. Excuse me. We also have an Apparel Academy, so theapparelacademy.com. And then we also are just launching a mentoring group, which is with me, and we're starting it brand new. It actually starts today at noon. And we already have some members signed up. So what I'm doing is once a week, I'm getting online, and I'm just there. I'm just there for you. I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to find out where you're at in the process, see what's getting you stuck, see what you're, I'll make recommendations, everything like that. So if you would like to be part of that mentoring group, again, once a week, I'm going to get online for a full hour, and I am just there for anyone in this mentoring group I'm going to do a mini presentation, but most of that time is going to be Q&A time. It is $20 a month. So if you think about that, well, actually $40 after the first month. So if you think about that, it's you're only paying $10 a week for that one full hour to hear me either give you advice and answer questions, or even to hear your your peers getting their questions answered, and you're going to learn a lot from that. And you can cancel anytime. So if you want to check that out, again, if you want to email info@clothierDesignSource.com and just say you're interested in the mentoring group, and we'll give you more details and get you signed up. But if you sign up today, if you reach out today, you get the first month for $20, and then after that it's $40 a month, and you can cancel anytime. So I want it to be beneficial to you. If you already have gotten everything you can out of it, then for sure cancel. And the reason why I'm doing it every week is you might not be able to log on every week when I'm on, but just know if you do have a question that week, I will be on to answer your questions. All right, so somebody has asked a question, Liz. Please explain two-way versus four-way stretch fabrics. I've heard that two-way actually means one-way, four-way actually means two-way. Oh, interesting. Yeah, good question. Okay, so fabric can either stretch this way, or it can stretch this way, or it can stretch, I can't do it, but both ways. And so if it's a two-way stretch, for instance, it might just stretch this way, but then if you were to take it and pull this way, it won't stretch, it'll be taut. So that's called a two-way stretch, and the reason why somebody might think of it as one way versus two-way is when you pull this way, and we call that two-way stretch because it's stretching to the right and stretching to the left. I guess you might think of that as one plane, and it might be one. If you have a fabric that stretches this way and this way, that's called four-way stretch because it stretches up and down and right and left. I hope I answered your question. Or some people might call that only two-way because it's up, it's the vertical direction and the horizontal direction. Hopefully that answers your question, Liz. Good question. So again, we also have the Apparel Academy. So if you're really looking to launch into it, we have an Apparel Academy February 16th. Let's come into the factory. I teach a one-day event. We give networking time. We have lunch provided. We do a factory tour, and we really launch into like the nuts and bolts of how to get your apparel line created. So we do that in factory. We do a live stream, and we do a mini academy. And if you want to stay connected with us, then follow us on Instagram. We do a lot of YouTube educational videos, and we're also active on Facebook. So again, if you want to stay connected with us, reach out to info@ClothierDesignSource. Let's do a free consult with you. Even if we can't help you, we really try to be helpful. And then if you want to join that mentoring group, just mention that in the email as well. Great. Liz says that explanation of using the word planes really helps. So yeah, on a horizontal plane or a vertical plane. All right, well, thanks everyone. I'll stay on for just one more second if there's any more questions. Otherwise, I'll be signing off, and we hope to hear from you, and just stay in touch. All right, have a good day.